When my dad died, I didn't cry. And it's not because I didn't care, but it was because it kind of confirmed something that I already knew, which is that he wasn't going to be the man that I hoped he'd be. And I remember the day that I found out. I was at home alone and the police knocked on the door. They said his name and asked me if I knew him. And I'll be honest, my first thought was that they were talking about my brother because they share the same name. But when I realized that they meant my dad was gone, I kind of just stood there and I didn't really know what to feel. I brought him into the kitchen, we sat down, they explained to me the situation, that he's been found at the house that he was living in because he was estranged from the family. And it's kind of when it hit me, like, you can lose someone long before they're actually gone. So after he did pass away, it was up to me, my mum, and my brothers and sister to clean up his mess. And it's kind of poetic in that way because we've been doing that our whole lives, really. Cleaning up after him, looking after him, making sure people don't discover the type of guy that he was. But I'll talk about that a bit more later. And I just remember going into the house that he was staying at and having to clean up his stuff and, throw things away, give things to charity, etc. And it just felt like stepping into a life that I didn't really know. Because he had a lot of secrets. He was a Nigerian old man. He was very secretive. And even in his passing, there was a lot of mystery. And he died alone. Going to the house that he was staying in, I remember looking at the chair that he was sat in when he passed and, seeing the stains on it, the smell of the house, and realizing that he was here for a long time by himself, to the point where his body had started to decay. I know that is gross, but yeah, I lived it. It's kind of hard to describe what that does to you, literally cleaning up the stains from your dad's dead body. And I'm not gonna lie, it did mess me up for a while. There were nights where I would kind of just imagine what it was like for him to sit there, slowly dying. I was wondering what was on his mind. Did he think about us in his last moments? Did he have any regrets? Did he wish he was a better dad? Did he wish he was a better person? I don't know. And maybe I don't need to know. And it's not like we ever had a very good relationship in general. My dad was someone who was a very angry man. He didn't know how to express himself other than to shout. He didn't know how to speak gentle. He didn't know how to care for other people. He was just a very egotistical man who didn't really know how to express himself. And for a long time, I didn't know how to really process his death, simply because I felt like he was dead to me a long time ago. And the emptiness that I felt after he was gone didn't really surprise me, because it kind of felt like losing someone that you never really had much closeness to begin with. Because I'll be honest, a part of me wanted to feel sadder. A part of me wanted to really grieve and have that feeling you feel like you should have when your father dies. And I didn't really feel it. And that really confused me for a long time. Because I realized I was kind of mourning the idea of a father more than I was really mourning the man himself. And for a while that made me feel like I was doing it wrong, or I was a bad person, or I was a bad son. And in general, my dad didn't really have a great relationship with many people in his life. He was a very secretive man who kind of created his own reality. He would often dominate spaces in our house, like not allow us to express ourselves, always tell us to remain quiet, yet he was the loudest one in the room. And I always did find that strange, because as soon as we'd have family or friends around, he would completely change. He'd suddenly be able to be nice. He'd suddenly be able to smile. And I always found that to be quite frustrating. And I'll be honest, he has had a major effect on me, and not in the best way. Because his absence, he was there physically, but not emotionally at all. It made me not know how to express myself. It made me question if I was a man. It made me question how to show up as a person. And for a long time, I didn't really know how to carry myself. I didn't have him to lead me when I was young. He was kind of just there to keep me in line and make sure I didn't do bad things, but he didn't really show me what to do. And for a long time, I had to kind of just freestyle and figure it out on my own. Because the truth is, my dad was almost like a stranger to me. He was a stranger in the house. He was kind of just there, but I didn't know anything about him. I didn't know what football team he supported. I didn't know any of his friends. I barely even knew his family, really. And I think that really did explain who he was to a T. He was a lonely man, but a man who was unable to acknowledge or, be vulnerable enough to say he was lonely. And to be honest, I didn't know much about him. I didn't know much about his younger life, like his early life, his regrets, or what he believed in. And grieving someone that you barely know feels like trying to cry for a stranger that you just share DNA with. And that's why his funeral was such a strange situation. Other than the major financial costs and the stress and emotional distress you go through during a funeral, it was altogether quite a strange experience. I remember literally carrying his coffin with my brothers, and it just hit me all in one. Like, this is probably the one time I've been able to do something for him, and it was because he couldn't say no. Like, the physical weight of carrying his coffin, which was heavy as fuck, to be honest, it kind of matched the emotional weight that I've been carrying for years. Like, carrying his disinterest, carrying his anger towards me, carrying his frustrations with himself, and how he used to use that against us. And something strange happened at the wake. So after the funeral, it was the first time I'd really met some of his friends or people that he knew outside of the family. And it made me realize that he wasn't who he said he was. Like, people were saying that how he was a great man and how he was so friendly and so loving and so gracious. And I was just sitting there thinking, that isn't the man that I know. And that caused a bit of tension, because when we were asked to express our feelings and thoughts towards Dad, they were met with confusion by everyone else. And that's when I realized that he'd been lying to his friends and his family for years about who he was and what he was doing. He was making it seem like he was some sort of loving family man who was all about his family, and he was constantly doing stuff for everyone, when really he was a really selfish man who didn't really do much for his family, but he knew that he should have. So he was keeping appearances up. And seeing how they talked about him like he was a completely different person, it really just made me realize that he'd been living a lie. And feeling that mixture of anger and pity, kind of just realizing that I never really got to meet the version that everyone else knew. Everyone else said he was great and he was loving, and I never got to experience that. I felt and do still feel robbed. And the harsh truth that I've been coming to terms with is that he never loved me, at least not the way that I needed to, at least not the way that I deserved to. And that doesn't have to define my life anymore. That doesn't have to be who I am. I don't have to be the guy whose dad didn't love him. And that absence that, he had in my life, it does create a wound. And it's a wound that doesn't really bleed all the time, but it just kind of lingers in the background. Kind of just lingers in the background of your mind when you go through daily life. Because I realized I was constantly trying to impress him. I was constantly trying to make myself into someone that he could love. Because I spent years chasing that validation until I realized that it was never coming. And this is how I've been trying to learn to let go. Learning to let go of the need to, impress this person or to feel like he was proud of me. And something that I feel like has really helped me is trying to reparent myself. So trying to teach myself how to love again. Trying to teach myself how to protect those I care about. Trying to teach myself how to care in ways that he just couldn't. Because I do want to be a better man. I do want to literally be better than he ever was. And not even out of spite, not even in a spiteful way, but I just want to see what my potential is. I want to see who I can be without carrying, his weight on my shoulders anymore. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I really want to see what happens when I turn this pain that I've been carrying and this pain that maybe you've been carrying as well into purpose, into some sort of meaning. Because what's the point of all of this? What's the point of going through all these bad times if you can't turn it into something that matters, something that means something to you? And I do remember one of the last times I saw him, I did finally have a sit down with him. It was a brief one, maybe around 2 to 3 minutes, because he quickly got up and went to do something else. But I gave him a hug, probably our first hug, because wow, just remembering this now. The last time I did try to give him a hug before that was when I was maybe around 6. It was after school. I was very excited. I had a great day, and I ran to him because he was picking me up from school. I ran to him to give him a hug, and he literally refused. He he put his hand out and stopped me from hugging him and shook my hand. And that was the last time, until literally maybe a month or 2 before he passed, that I tried to hug him. And I think that small moment gave me a tiny bit of peace. It made me kind of have a full circle moment where the man who once denied me of love was now suddenly a bit more open to it, a bit more open to seeing me. But it's important to understand that closure doesn't come from other people. Closure comes from yourself. Because all closure is deciding that the story you have for yourself is more important than the story anyone else has for you. And I now realize that I can accept the flawed person he was without trying to carry on his legacy and without trying to carry on the expectations of who he could have been or who he should have been. And I just hope that, if you've gone through something similar to this, if you've also lost your dad and maybe you didn't have a great relationship with him, you don't hold it against him anymore. That maybe you take some time to reflect and just understand that, if anything, he at least gave you an example of what not to do. He at least gave you an example of how not to be. He at least showed you what can happen if you repeat his mistakes. And I think that's an invaluable lesson, because losing my dad wasn't like losing someone who I was really close to. It was like losing a ghost that I've been chasing my whole life. And the hardest part wasn't his death, it was accepting that he was never going to give me what I needed, even when he was alive. But I've learned that healing doesn't always mean forgetting. It means becoming the person that they couldn't be. So if you've lost someone you never really had, I get it. You're not alone. But there are bright days ahead, if you believe there are.